Corrupt officer arrests. 2 Navy SEALs. Panics. When their admiral enters the courtroom, the restaurant door swung shut behind them, laughter still lingering on their lips. Malik Thompson held the door for Rebecca Lang, the two of them stepping into the quiet night. Streetlights glowed against the dark pavement, the kind of evening where nothing should have gone wrong. But trouble was already waiting. From the corner of the lot, a patrol car pulled forward, headlights cutting across the asphalt. The tires slowed, and the figure behind the wheel straightened with the kind of confidence that comes only from power misused. Officer Preston Wells stepped out, hand resting casually near his holster, his smirk sharp enough to slice through the calm. "Hold it right there," he barked, voice carrying across the stillness. No reason, no warning, just authority twisted into arrogance. Rebecca froze, confusion flashing across her face. Malik kept his hands visible, every movement deliberate, steady, training etched into his muscles. But Wells wasn't looking for compliance. He was looking for control. The celebration they'd just left behind now felt like a memory swallowed by the night. Wells circled them like a predator, certain of his prey. His badge gleamed under the lamplight, a shield he believed made him untouchable. What he didn't know was that this moment would follow him into a courtroom where the truth waited, patient, heavy, and unstoppable. Officer Preston Wells closed the distance with slow, deliberate steps, his boots striking the pavement like a warning. The parking lot fell into silence except for the hum of his engine still idling behind him. His eyes narrowed, scanning Malik and Rebecca as if they were suspects caught in the middle of a crime. "Where are you two coming from?" His voice was sharp, carrying the weight of command, but none of the professionalism it was meant to represent. Malik kept his stance calm, his shoulders squared but relaxed. "Dinner," he answered simply, his tone even. "Nothing more, nothing less." Wells tilted his head, a mocking smile tugging at his mouth. "Dinner at this hour?" He took another step closer, now standing just a few feet away. "Strange. People like you usually attract trouble after dark." Rebecca's brows knit together. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked carefully, her voice steady but cautious, her hands resting where he could see them. The smirk widened. "That depends." "You planning on making one?" The air tightened between them. Malik kept his focus, refusing to rise to the bait. "We are not here for trouble," he said. "We ate, we paid, we are heading home." Wells's hand tapped lightly against his holster. "Funny, you sound rehearsed, like someone who knows how to lie without blinking." Rebecca shook her head. "That is not fair. We have done nothing wrong." The words were calm, but Wells twisted them instantly. He raised his voice just loud enough to echo off the brick wall of the restaurant. "Did you hear that?" He just admitted they are hiding something. A couple walking past slowed their pace, eyes flicking toward the scene. Wells noticed the attention, and his posture straightened as if the growing audience fed his arrogance. He stepped into Malik's space, so close their shoulders almost touched. "Hands on the wall," he ordered. Malik's jaw tightened. "With respect, officer, I do not understand the cause." The smile vanished, replaced by cold irritation. Wells' hand shot forward, shoving Malik's chest until his back hit the wall. "Do not play games with me," he growled. Rebecca gasped, stepping forward instinctively. "Stop, he is not resisting." The officer spun toward her, finger pointing like a weapon. "Stay right there. Raise your hands." Her breath caught, but she obeyed. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hands into the glow of the streetlight. The couple nearby stopped altogether, their eyes widening at the display. Wells thrived on it. His voice rose louder, sharp and theatrical. "Look at this. 2 so-called professionals who think they are above the law, now caught resisting, right in front of witnesses." "Resisting?" Malik's voice cut through the night, steady even as Wells twisted his arm into the metal of the wall. "I have complied with every order." But Wells was already reaching for the cuffs. With a rough jerk, he pulled Malik's wrists behind his back and snapped the steel shut. The metallic click echoed in the air like a verdict being read. Rebecca could feel her pulse racing. "He is not resisting," she repeated, her voice rising now, trembling with frustration. Wells turned his focus on her. In 2 strides, he was in front of her, grabbing her wrist, spinning her roughly until her cheek pressed against the cold hood of the patrol car. The cuffs tightened around her wrists with the same merciless rhythm. By now, more eyes had gathered at the edge of the lot, A man pulled out his phone, recording from a distance. Whispers rippled through the small crowd, yet no one stepped forward. Wells raised his voice again, addressing no one in particular, but ensuring the audience could hear. Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, aggression toward an officer. Every word was a fabrication, spoken with confidence as though truth and lies held the same weight when a badge delivered them. Rebecca's chest heaved, but she forced her voice to stay strong. "This is wrong. We did nothing to you." The officer leaned close to her ear, his whisper venomous. "You will learn fast that what I say is what counts." With Malik cuffed, Rebecca pinned, and the eyes of strangers watching in silence, Wells shoved them both toward the open doors of the squad car. The slam of metal rang like the closing of a trap. The ride ahead was short, but every second carried the weight of injustice. The celebration that had begun with smiles was gone, replaced by humiliation that burned deeper than any wound. And somewhere beneath the surface, the anger building in both Malik and Rebecca was waiting, ready to clash with the arrogance that thought it could bury the truth forever. The patrol car rolled into the station yard, red and blue lights washing across the concrete walls. Malik and Rebecca sat cuffed in the back, the silence between them heavy but unbroken. When the doors opened, Wells yanked Malik out first, gripping his arm as though force alone could prove guilt. Rebecca followed, wrists stiff from the tightness of the cuffs. Inside the booking area, the fluorescent lights buzzed above their heads, casting a pale glow over the room. Wells handed their IDs to the desk sergeant with a grin plastered across his face. 2 for the night. Resisting arrest, disturbing the peace, and let us not forget, assaulting an officer. The sergeant raised an eyebrow. His gaze lingered on Malik's calm posture, then shifted to Rebecca's composed expression. For a moment, doubt flickered, but Wells's tone left no space for questions. "Paperwork will speak for itself," he said, sliding a report form onto the counter. Malik's voice carried low but steady. "That report is a lie." Wells leaned closer, his smile sharp. "And yours will not matter once mine is signed." With that, the cuffs were removed only long enough to fingerprint them, then replaced. They were escorted to separate holding cells, metal doors slamming behind them, with a finality that made the air colder. Rebecca sat on the bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the hall, Malik lowered himself onto the steel seat, his eyes fixed on the scuffed floor. For a long stretch, there was only silence, broken finally by Rebecca's voice, barely above a whisper. "We have faced worse, Malik, but this feels different." He lifted his head, meeting her gaze through the narrow gap in the bars. "In battle, at least you know who the enemy is," she continued. "Here it is twisted. The rules are broken and they call it justice." Malik did not answer at once. His training had taught him patience, taught him to weigh every moment before speaking. Finally, his voice emerged, calm but heavy. "The battlefield prepares you for bullets, not betrayal." Down the hall, laughter drifted from the squad room. Wells leaned against a desk, recounting the night with a smug confidence that drew smirks from 2 younger officers. "You should have seen their faces," he bragged, waving his hands as if performing a show. "All that military discipline gone in a second. I put them down hard. People like that think they are untouchable." Tonight I reminded them who holds the badge. One officer chuckled uncomfortably, but another looked away, the discomfort of truth gnawing at his conscience. Wells did not notice. He was too busy basking in the glow of his own arrogance. Hours passed. The holding cells grew quiet again. Malik rested his head against the wall, eyes half closed, but his thoughts churned relentlessly. He had led missions across oceans, navigated hostile territories, carried men wounded through fire, and stood in front of danger to shield others. Yet here in his own country, a uniform meant nothing. Here, the same hands that had defended the flag were shackled because one man had twisted the meaning of justice. When dawn broke, the process began to move. Malik and Rebecca were transferred for arraignment, their names already appearing in local reports. Words like resisting, disturbance, and assault painted them as criminals before they had spoken a word in court. The drive to the courthouse carried the weight of inevitability. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones ready, cameras pointed, eager for the image of 2 service members facing charges that stained their records. Flashes burst as soon as they stepped from the transport van, the sound of shouted questions filling the air. Commander Thompson, did you resist? Rebecca, why attack an officer? Neither answered. Their silence was not weakness, it was discipline. Every word spoken outside those walls could be twisted inside them. Inside the courthouse, whispers rippled through the gallery. Spectators leaned forward, recognizing the defendants not as soldiers, but as accused criminals. Wells strutted toward the prosecution table, his suit pressed, his grin unchanged. He carried the swagger of a man convinced the system belonged to him. Rebecca glanced sideways at Malik as they were seated at the defense table. They already believe him, she murmured. Malik nodded once. His jaw was tight, but his eyes remained steady. Belief is fragile. Truth will stand. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Tasha Brooks entered, her robe flowing as she took her place at the bench. Her gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Wells, then shifting to Malik and Rebecca. Her face revealed nothing. Charges were read aloud, each word slicing through the quiet air like a blade. Resisting arrest. Disturbing the peace. Assault on a law enforcement officer. Gasps echoed faintly from the gallery. Rebecca kept her back straight. Malik folded his hands calmly in front of him. Neither flinched. Yet inside, the sting of injustice pressed hard. Wells leaned back, confidence radiating from his posture. He whispered to the prosecutor beside him, a smirk pulling at his lips. He had crafted the story, and now he watched as it was laid like stone into the foundation of their case. Malik's thoughts drifted just for a moment. He remembered the desert heat, the weight of armor, the sound of chaos around him as he led his team through enemy fire. Back then, every second demanded clarity, every choice carried the weight of lives. He had fought not for glory, but for the principle that his country's values mattered. And yet here he sat, branded a criminal for daring to exist in the wrong place at the wrong time. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Whatever happened in this courtroom, one truth would remain. Integrity was not granted by a badge, nor stripped by a false report. It lived in the choices made when no one was watching, and Malik was determined that his would not be broken. The first arguments began, the prosecution leaning heavily on Wells's fabricated account. Every word built pressure, every phrase painted Malik and Rebecca as aggressors. But behind the polished lies, cracks were waiting. And soon, one voice would enter the room that Wells had not prepared for. One voice powerful enough to tip the balance and bring truth into the light. The courtroom filled with a hushed tension as Judge Tasha Brooks entered, her black robe sweeping behind her. She carried herself with stern authority, every step measured, every glance sharp. The bailiff called the room to order, and silence fell instantly. Wells sat at the prosecution's table, shoulders back, his smirk returning the moment he caught Malik's eye. To him, this was already won. His badge, his report, his word, all of it felt like an unbreakable shield. Across the room, Malik and Rebecca sat side by side at the defense table. Their posture was upright, their expressions calm. They spoke no words, yet their silence carried a strength that unsettled even those watching from the gallery. Dignity wrapped around them like armor, though it was clear how heavy that armor had become. The prosecutor rose, holding a folder thick with papers. "Your Honor, the case is simple," she began. 2 individuals were taken into custody after creating a disturbance. They resisted arrest, and in the process, one assaulted Officer Wells. His official report details the entire incident. We intend to prove that this behavior was not only unlawful but dangerous. Judge Brooks gave a small nod, her expression unchanged. "Proceed." Malik listened without moving. Every word spoken painted him as something he was not. He had fought in wars, defended the lives of strangers, and now he sat accused of being the very threat he had always stood against. Rebecca felt the same weight pressing down on her chest, yet she kept her eyes steady, refusing to let despair show. Wells leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with smug satisfaction. The prosecutor's words sounded polished, confident, and most importantly, backed by the authority of his uniform. In his mind, the story was sealed. The badge was the truth and everything else was noise. A murmur drifted through the gallery as the prosecutor held up the report. This document, written and signed by Officer Wells himself, details the aggressive behavior of the defendants. It describes their refusal to comply, their hostile attitude, and their eventual assault. The paper looked ordinary, ink on pages, but in that moment, it carried the weight of a weapon. Wells's lies, dressed in the language of authority, became almost untouchable. Judge Brooks studied the document, then looked toward the defense table. "Do the defendants wish to speak?" Rebecca glanced at Malik, then shook her head faintly. They had agreed. No words yet. Silence was their weapon for now. Their choice only seemed to feed Wells's confidence. He smirked again, leaning forward as though to savor their restraint. In his mind, silence meant weakness. The courtroom air grew heavy. Every spectator could feel it, the imbalance, the unfairness. Malik and Rebecca stood tall, but the ground beneath them tilted sharply in Wells's favor. It looked like the truth was trapped behind locked doors, and only the lies were free to walk the floor. Judge Brooks gave a small rap of her gavel. "We will proceed with witness testimony." Wells straightened his tie, preparing to take the stand. His confidence radiated across the room like heat. For him, this was not a trial, it was a performance. And he believed the audience already belonged to him. From the defense table, Malik drew a quiet breath. He was ready to endure, but even he could not ignore the rising question in his heart. Would the truth be enough, or had the system already chosen its side? The prosecutor closed her folder with a crisp snap, her final words echoing through the courtroom. "The evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor. These defendants are not victims, they are aggressors." Judge Tasha Brooks leaned back, her expression unreadable. Wells folded his arms, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. To him, this was already finished. Then the heavy wooden doors creaked open. The sound cut through the silence like a strike of thunder. All eyes turned. A figure entered, tall, composed, carrying the weight of authority that needed no badge to prove itself. Admiral Andre Bennett stepped forward, his decorated uniform gleaming under the courtroom lights. Rows of medals caught the glow, each one a silent story of sacrifice and leadership. He did not rush, nor did he hesitate. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. Even those who did not know his name instinctively sat straighter. Wells's smirk faltered, just slightly, but enough to notice. "Your Honor," Bennett said, his voice steady, resonant, the kind that carried not just words but conviction. "With the court's permission, I would like to submit service records and character testimony for Malik Thompson and Rebecca Lang." The prosecutor frowned, about to object, but Judge Brooks raised a hand. "Proceed." Bennett placed a folder on the bench, thicker than Wells's fabricated report. Inside are years of service history, records of 2 individuals who have defended this country at the highest cost. Men and women under their command owe their lives to their leadership. Communities owe their safety to their sacrifice. He turned then, facing the gallery, his voice deepening. When Malik Thompson and Rebecca Lang put on the uniform, they stood for honor, courage, and integrity. They faced dangers most of us will never see. Not for glory, not for reward, but because it was right. And now they stand here accused, not because of what they did, but because of one man's arrogance and lies. A stir swept through the courtroom. Eyes shifted toward Wells. His jaw tightened, the confidence that had carried him all morning thinning at the edges. Bennett's gaze fixed on the judge again. The truth is simple. These 2 are not criminals. They are heroes. And if we allow false words to outweigh years of sacrifice, then the system itself is on trial today. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, electric, filled with the weight of something shifting. Wells adjusted his collar, his earlier smirk now replaced with a tight line. For the first time, his certainty cracked. Rebecca glanced at Malik, and for the first time since the arrest, a flicker of hope lit in her eyes. Malik's posture remained steady, but his breath eased. A small release, as if the battlefield no longer felt quite so one-sided. The audience felt it too, the spark of change. The tide had turned. What had seemed like a hopeless fight was no longer about survival. It was about truth finally stepping into the room. Admiral Bennett did not stop at words. He lifted another folder, heavier than the first, and placed a small drive into the court clerk's hands. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "this contains surveillance footage from the restaurant parking lot. It will show exactly what happened the night Officer Wells made his arrest." The clerk connected the drive. A monitor flickered to life. The courtroom leaned forward as the screen lit up with grainy but clear images. Malik and Rebecca appeared, stepping out of the restaurant doors. Their movements calm, peaceful. Wells' patrol car rolled into view, headlights cutting across the lot. The next moments told a story without the need for words. Wells' aggressive stance, his finger jabbing toward them. Malik's hands raised, open, steady. Rebecca speaking softly, her gestures small, meant to calm. Then Wells forcing them against the wall, cuffs snapping tight on their wrists. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Murmurs spread like wildfire. What they saw was not resistance. It was not disturbance. It was control abused, authority twisted. The video ended. Silence filled the room, broken only by Wells shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Judge Tasha Brooks leaned forward, her sharp gaze fixed on him. "Officer Wells," she said slowly, "this footage directly contradicts your sworn report. You wrote that the defendants resisted, that they became violent. Where in this video is that shown?" Wells opened his mouth, but no words came. His earlier confidence had vanished. He stumbled, voice low. "The camera? It must not show everything. They were disrespectful." "Disrespectful?" The judge's tone cut like steel. "Since when does disrespect justify false charges, physical force, and fabricated testimony?" Wells' face flushed. His eyes darted across the room, but there was no anchor left to cling to. The badge on his chest, once his shield, now gleamed under the lights like a symbol of guilt. Admiral Bennett's voice carried again, calm but powerful. "That badge is supposed to represent service, integrity, protection. When worn with honor, it is a symbol of trust. When abused, it becomes a mark of disgrace." The words struck deep. Wells lowered his gaze, his smirk long gone, his shoulders hunched as though the very uniform he wore now weighed him down. Judge Brooks lifted her gavel. "The evidence is clear. Malik Thompson and Rebecca Lang are innocent of all charges. The court orders their immediate release." A cheer nearly erupted from the gallery, but quieted under the gravity of the moment. The judge's voice hardened. "As for you, Officer Wells, this court finds probable cause to charge you with filing a false report, abuse of authority, and perjury under oath. Bailiff, take him into custody." The room shifted as two deputies stepped forward. Wells's hands, once so quick to cuff others, were now pulled behind his back. The clink of metal filled the silence. For Malik and Rebecca, it was a moment of vindication. The humiliation they endured, the lies they carried, now lay exposed in the harshest light. Rebecca's eyes closed briefly, a tear sliding free, not of defeat but of release. Malik stood tall, his chest rising with the steady breath of a soldier who had fought another battle and finally seen justice prevail. The badge Wells had used as a weapon now marked his downfall. What he thought made him untouchable had stripped him of everything. And for everyone watching, the message was undeniable. Truth may bend under lies for a time, but it never breaks. The clang of the cuffs closing on Preston Wells echoed in the courtroom long after he was led away. For the first time since that night in the parking lot, the air felt lighter. Malik and Rebecca stood side by side, no longer prisoners, but people whose dignity had been restored. Judge Tasha Brooks gave a final nod before leaving the bench, her words still hanging in the air. "Justice is not a privilege, it is a duty." The murmurs of reporters filled the gallery, their pens scratching furiously, cameras clicking to capture the moment. Malik exhaled slowly, a quiet release of the weight he had carried. Rebecca brushed a tear from her cheek, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. When Admiral Bennett stepped closer, his presence as steady as ever, Malik and Rebecca turned to him with gratitude etched in their faces. "You saved us," Rebecca said softly. Bennett shook his head. "No, the truth saved you. I was just here to make sure it had a voice. But remember this." His eyes sharpened. "You had me. Most civilians do not get that chance. They face the same injustice without someone to stand for them." His words struck deeper than the gavel. Malik looked down for a moment, then back at his commanding officer. "Then maybe that is what makes this fight bigger than us. Uniforms end battles overseas, but here at home, it should not take one to be treated fairly." Bennett's hand rested firmly on Malik's shoulder, then on Rebecca's. "That is exactly why truth matters. For every citizen, not just the ones in uniform." Outside, the courthouse doors opened. Sunlight spilled across the steps, washing over Malik and Rebecca as they walked forward. Reporters swarmed, microphones reaching, questions flying. "How does it feel to be free after such humiliation?" one voice called out. Malik paused. turning just enough so his voice carried over the crowd. It feels like a win for truth. But the real question is, how many never get their truth heard? Rebecca stood beside him, her voice steady and clear. No one should lose their dignity because of lies. Justice is not about power. It is about fairness, and fairness should belong to everyone. The words cut through the chaos. The cameras kept flashing, but Malik and Rebecca did not flinch. They continued forward, heads high, Admiral Bennett walking just a step behind. In that moment, the victory was more than personal. It was symbolic, a reminder that power without accountability is dangerous. But courage once sparked can ignite justice for all. And as they left the courthouse, their story became more than their own. It became a warning, a promise, and a spark for anyone watching.